Welcome into Jungle Tales, a Pirate Baseball podcast. We appreciate everyone tuning in. And it's the season debut of On Deck, which means it's obviously game week. The Pirates hosting the Xavier Musketeers out of the Big East this weekend, 4 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and 12:30, Friday, Saturday, Sunday at Clark-LeClair Stadium. And right now, as you see there on the screen, we are joined by their ninth-year head coach, Billy O'Connor. Coach, we appreciate your time today.
Yeah, happy to come on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So I think you began your career with a couple seasons at IU, which obviously has been in the news a lot with what they did on the gridiron this year. But then you moved over to Xavier, a program that had not had a ton of success in baseball, and you were able to, have a lot of success as a player there, win a championship. Then you came on as an assistant coach, and now, like I mentioned, nearly a decade as the head coach. So if you would just talk about your time there in Cincinnati.
Yeah, Xavier's a special place to me. So my dad is a Xavier graduate. I grew up a huge Xavier basketball fan. I started going to games when I was 2 years old. Basically, really had no allegiance to the baseball program whatsoever. There wasn't, like you said, it wasn't super successful, and they didn't really recruit a ton of kids from our area. It wasn't an option for me. I wasn't recruited at all out of high school by Xavier. I'm sure I probably would have gone if I was. But when I was deciding to transfer, I had some friends that were at Xavier. I knew there's going to be an opportunity for me to come in and play right away. So it was a pretty smooth transition. Like you said, came in, was able to play my last 2 years there, won championships both years, and pretty much have been there ever since. So incredibly fortunate to still be a part of this place. And, for all of us, for every coach, I think it's special to coach anywhere you are. But when it's your alma mater and you have the deep connections that I have, and be able to work your way up like I have, it's extra special that way, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. Obviously, East Carolina head coach Cliff Godwin is an alum and has had so much success over the last decade plus in Greenville since returning back prior to the 2015 season. But as you take a look more specifically here recently, one of the things that jumps out to me is how you really like to challenge yourself in the non-conference. In addition to this 3-game series at East Carolina, you have a 3-game series at Arkansas, 3 at Fullerton, 4 at Oregon State. You also have 3 later on in the season at Georgia Tech, and then you have midweek games against the likes of Louisville, Ohio State, Vanderbilt, Michigan, Oregon for 2 in a midweek series while you're out west. So just talk about that philosophy and that tremendous schedule that you've put together.
Yeah, we want to challenge ourselves, and I think that's the best way to grow as a program. I think that's the best way to get our guys to grow as individuals is play against the best competition we can possibly find. It works on a couple different levels, right? We're trying to be an at-large team. We haven't yet. In the Big East Conference, you have to put together a really good schedule, and you have to test yourself against the best to prove that you're an at-large team. We've been close. We've been a bubble team. I think some people had us in at the end of the year last year. Obviously, the only people that really matter, the committee didn't have us in. So we're looking to get over that hump. I think that's how you grow. I think that prepares you for what's coming down the line when we've made the NCAA tournament. We've always had success. We've been to regional final the last 3 times we've been to the NCAA tournament. And I think a lot of that comes down to we are preparing ourselves early in the year for the environments that we want to play in later in the year. That's why we're coming down to East Carolina. Can't think of a better place to come down and play against such a great program and such storied success in a great environment too. I know it's hostile. The jungle gets fired up, and that's awesome. We love playing there. And again, I think that's Friday night. That might be a little overwhelming for our guys, but hopefully by Saturday and Sunday, it's like, yeah, let's go. All right, let's strap it on. Let's compete a little bit.
Yeah, fingers crossed as far as the weather. We were discussing pre-show just as far as how Cincinnati and Greenville had a foot plus of snow here in the recent weeks. And so that's made things challenging. But the combination of your climate and that challenging schedule, I noticed 17 of your first 18 are on the road. So you guys truly are the road warriors.
For sure. We'll be battle tested. We actually just got back late last night. We flew down to Florida for the weekend to get outside and practice a little bit because we haven't been able to get out on our field for about a month or so. So it was good to get down there and get a little bit of work in and see some fly balls and be able to take batting practice on the field. So hopefully it pays off this weekend.
So before we dive into this roster specifically, taking a look at the Big East Conference, I noticed you guys are picked 3rd behind the likes of UConn and then also the Creighton Blue Jays. Tell us about that league and what it brings to the table and where you see your guys, factoring in.
Yeah, it's a good baseball league, especially the top half. You know, UConn is incredibly consistent. I think you guys were in the American with UConn at one point, correct? Um, you know, it's tough to keep track of all these conference changes and who crosses paths with who. But you know, Coach Penders and that staff does an incredible job. They're as consistent as can be. They play really hard. They play good baseball. They're always a force to be reckoned with. Creighton had a really nice year last year, and they returned some pieces where I think they'll be a solid team again. St. John's has been historically a good program. Seton Hall's got some really good players, and there's some other teams too. You know, Georgetown's put together some good rosters, and Villanova and Butler. So it's good baseball, you know. And I think the top half is competing for at-large berths every year. We're trying to position ourselves to really do what we can do in the non-conference, and then follow through and win the regular season, because I think that's the pathway to getting at-large within our conference. So it's good baseball. You know, we are all, for the most part, pretty challenged from a weather standpoint. So sometimes it takes us a little bit to get going early on in the year. But you know, some of those teams at the top half of the league, you know, they're always super competitive. Feel good about where we're at. You know, it's usually a toss up between a few of us to who's going to win the regular season, and I think probably going to be the same way this year.
For people that haven't seen the Musketeers play, and if you would, before we talk specifically about some of those players, describe your style of baseball. And then also, I specifically wanted you to address Dr. Highland. He's someone you brought on board from an analytic standpoint back, I think, prior to the 2019 season. And he had been on campus there at Xavier since the early 2000s. And I know he's been quite the asset to your program.
For sure. Yeah, from how we play, one of the guys who plays super hard. Want to play fundamentally sound, want to play good baseball. You know, I love competitive guys. I love guys that have a chip on the shoulder. And quite honestly, that's who we have to be successful. To go down to ECU and think we're going to have success, to go down to Arkansas, to go down to Fullerton and Oregon State and Georgia Tech and Oregon and all these places, like, can't be scared, right? You got to go in there and be aggressive and have a chip on your shoulder and be ready to compete. You know, I want our guys, whether we're up 10, down 10, up 50, down 50, they're going to play as hard as they possibly can, you know, and play the game the right way. So hopefully that comes through this weekend. You know, the part that's interesting is when rosters turn over like they do right now, right? So the retention rate is low for everybody in college baseball because of the transfer portal. You hope that the culture and the way you play and everything that goes into it stays, right? And sometimes that takes a little bit longer to kind of instill in guys than just the off season. And you know, things speed up once you get going. But you know, hopefully, you know, Friday night, you know, everybody in Greenville at Clark-LeClair Stadium says, man, those guys play hard. You know, maybe we won, maybe we lost, but those guys played their asses off. So that's what we're trying to do. From a Dr. Highland standpoint, he's the man. You know, he's a finance professor here at Xavier, and he just loves baseball. He teaches a sabermetrics class to the students there that I come over and talk to every semester. So he just loves diving in, loves helping us out. He runs all our TrackMan stuff. He's constantly putting together different charts and graphs. And, you know, with where we're at Xavier, and I'm not sure the depth of the staff at ECU, but a lot of these Power Four type schools, they have 15 different guys on staff. They got a director of this, a director of that, you know, an assistant director of pitching development, and we don't. You know, we have four coaches. You know, and four coaches for 42 guys. The ratio is not great. So quite honestly, I don't, and a lot of my assistants don't. We don't really have the capacity to continue to add and add and add and add all the things you need to do to be successful. So to have the help of somebody like Dr. Highland that can come in and really kind of manage our analytics department, manage some of the tech that we have, and not just manage it, but be able to translate it to us and translate it to the players so that they're comfortable kind of utilizing it in the game setting, it's an incredible asset for us. So he's such a good person. You know, I mean, it's a strictly volunteer role. He doesn't make a dime from Xavier baseball. He just loves helping out, loves being around the game. We're so appreciative to have him.
Yeah, no, that's what really intrigued me. Like you mentioned, being somewhat short on resources for the reasons that you mentioned. I thought that was awesome to be able to bring a guy into the mix like that and get a lot of bang for your buck. But
Mhm.
now shifting over to your roster, and let's start positionally. I know you have a couple guys that are preseason All Big East. Let's begin with Connor Mish, 338 a year ago, 4 bombs, 50 driven in, 11 doubles. Tell us about Connor. I know he's a veteran.
Yeah, Connor's just such a tough at bat. Every time he gets in there, it's he's got a great approach. He's got great bat to ball. He didn't have a ton of home runs last year, but I think that number's going to go up this year just because he's made a couple swing changes that I think is going to translate to being able to pull the ball a little bit more than he did last year. But just a veteran guy. Every time he steps in, for me, it feels like he's going to get on base. He's going to have a really good at bat. He's going to do whatever job is in front of him from an offensive standpoint. So he's a big part of our offense, obviously.
In addition to Connor, guys like Clay Burdett, Tanner Thomas, Tommy Townsend, if you would elaborate on them. And then I noticed you brought at least 5 to 6 Division I transfers into the program. Tell us about some of those guys and what they bring to the table, and how your lineup is shaking out here going into opening weekend.
Yeah, Clay's got big time juice. He's the guy that I think is capable of hitting 15 to 20 home runs this year, and he's got to go do it, obviously. But like he's one of the strongest individuals I've ever been around, and my God, he hits the ball hard. He had one up to 117 ex velo last year, where it was like when I saw it, I was like, I've never seen a baseball move like that. And I was going out to left, and then we were in the first base dugout, and it's like that thing was going away for. I've never seen a baseball do that before. So he's a special player. And last year, he was a redshirt freshman. So his second year in college was his first year ever playing college baseball. Put together a really nice year and went through some struggles earlier in the year. So, the trend line that he's on from a production standpoint is pretty special, I think. So super excited about him, what he's going to be able to do this year. Tanner Thomas and Tommy Townsend are both transfers that come in from programs. Tommy was at Butler within our conference, and Tanner Thomas was at Gardner Webb this past year. Both have produced at a high level, and that's kind of what you're looking for in the portal nowadays, is guys that have done it, and to be able to point to a stat line and say that Tanner's produced in this manner and Tommy's produced in this manner. I think it really raises your floor as a program, to know that these guys have been there and done that. And also, those guys have a high ceiling, too. I don't think they've reached their full potential as players. So, what they've done in the past, I'm hopeful that they can even build on that. But good veteran presences that I think will be a part of our lineup.
Positionally, and just from a defensive standpoint, as you mentioned, you guys traveled down to the Sunshine State to have a little of that and be able to get outside and take some ground balls, some fly balls, and so forth. What have you seen out of your club defensively?
We were solid this weekend, which probably means we're going to kick it around this coming weekend and field 827 or something. But I think that there's, for the most part, the guys that are going to be out there, guys that have been there and played college baseball before. I don't think that we're going to run eight freshmen out opening weekend, which is it's going to let me sleep a little bit better this week, I think. But hopefully we catch and throw the ball. With playing against a program like ECU, and especially going against I'm assuming Ethan Norby on Friday night. Like I don't think we're going to hang 15 runs on them. So we're gonna need to situationally hit. We're gonna need to play fundamentally sound baseball. We're gonna need to make sure that we throw strikes and catch and throw the baseball. And you do that stuff, you have a chance against any team. You got to play well. You got to get the big hit. You got to make pitches. You got to make plays. But as long as you do that as a baseline, you give yourself a chance for the most part. So, but you start kicking around and walking guys, and you're just not going to beat a team as good as ECU.
I noticed you have your Friday night guy back, a veteran. I'll say veteran, redshirt sophomore Ryan Peach, 4-1, 437 last year, nearly 60 innings, 65 Ks. I did notice command was an issue at times, but if you would tell us about him, the rest of your rotation, and then we'll dive into the bullpen.
Yeah, Ryan's a special pitcher, and again, he was another one that was a redshirt freshman last year, missed his true freshman year with Tommy John. So, first year out of Tommy John recovery, and then first year playing college baseball, and he put together a really nice year for us. And again, like you said, that the command needs to get a little bit sharper, but when he's in the zone, he's really tough to hit. It's big time stuff. So, we're super excited for him to kind of kick things off every weekend on Fridays for us and set the tone, because he's a big time pitcher. So we're excited about that. Jack Noby, I think, is going to be our Saturday guy. He's going to take another big step forward. Another guy that was a freshman last year, pitched in some big roles for us. And it's so difficult to be successful as a freshman, and he did. He was successful, and not crazy successful, but if you come in and you throw leverage innings as a freshman, that's a really good year. And I think he's taken another big step forward too. And I think Jack Deteen kind of falls in that same boat. He had a rough freshman year. There's no doubt about it. But man, there have been very few kids that I've ever been as proud of how they've handled a year of statistical failure is Jack Tatine. You know, like that kid he was a big draft name out of high school. You know, he turned down a good amount of money to come to school at Xavier, and couldn't get anybody out last year. You know, like I felt terrible for him. We put him in and like an 8-0 game, and the ninth we're winning, and it'd be a home run. It's like, "Phew, okay, all right, one of these is gonna be clean sometime." And there weren't a ton of clean ones until the very end of the year. And as we got into May, he started to line it up, and it started to look pretty good. And he finished the year strong. And then he went up to the Cape, and he had a nice summer in the Cape. And then he came back and he took another step forward. But the point being, like, he could have looked around at the end of the year last year and said, "Man, I got a 15 ERA," or whatever it ended up being, and said, "Your fault, your fault, your fault, your fault." He didn't. He said, "I got to get better," you know, and like that's so rare amongst kids these days in the era that we live in, of the transfer portal, where nobody wants to look inwardly. Everybody wants to look outwardly for all their issues. And it's like, no, at the end of the day, like you just got to keep working. You got to get better. Everybody wants instant gratification. If I'm going to be a big leaguer, I'm going to be a Cy Young winner day one. It's not really how life works. You know, you just got to work hard every single day. And eventually, if you believe in the process and the process is really good, you're going to get to a point of where you're really successful. So I'm excited to see what he's going to do this year. We got a transfer named Carter Muck that's going to come in and I think play a big role. And he's a cool story. You know, I recruited him in high school. He told me no. He went to Kansas. He transferred from Kansas. I recruited him then. He told me no. He went to a junior college. He was leaving that junior college. I recruited him then and told me no. He went to Arizona. Then he went in the portal one last time this summer. And I was like, oh, man, I don't know if I can do it one more, because I love Carter. He was always such a great kid. And we always had a great relationship. And, you know, it hurts when a kid tells you no. But I reached out one more time, and he said, "You know what, Coach? That's so funny. I was just talking to my dad. I said, I hope that, you know, Xavier reaches out one more time." I was like, "Well, you're allowed to reach out to me one time. I've done all the reaching out so far, you know." But ultimately, he ended up with us, and he's a great kid, and he's super talented. And going to play a really big role on our staff for us. So I'm excited about where we're at from a pitching standpoint. I think that, and again, it's easier to have depth on February 9th than it is on, you know, April 9th. But I think that we've got more depth to our pitching staff than we've had in past years. I think we've got a little bit more stuff this year than we've had in past years. And we got to go do it. Maybe we give up 150 runs this weekend. Who knows? But, you know, I think that the pieces are in place for us to be able to have some success on the mound.
Yeah, that's what great story there regarding that young man. Persistence paying off, and in this day and age, you know, a lot of coaches, and you know, perhaps, you know, it's just a situation where you know, you have to look at what's best for your program. You can't take things personally when a young man goes somewhere else, and
100%.
and be able to get him on the bounce back. And you see it all the time, and we've certainly, not necessarily in baseball, but in other sports, you've seen guys at East Carolina and leave and then come back because they found out the grass wasn't greener, and
No doubt.
they
No
realized what a
doubt.
good situation they had with ECU football or whatever the case may have been. But
Yeah.
again, Coach, we really appreciate 20 minutes of your time today, and safe travels to you and the Musketeers, and best of luck as you move through the 2026 season.
Sounds good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Pirate Nation, that is the ninth-year head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Billy O'Connor. Again, 4 o'clock on Friday, 2 o'clock on Saturday, 12:30 on Sunday in the series finale. But again, we appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to follow us on social media at Jungle Tales Pod on X, Instagram, and as well as YouTube, Facebook, and Spotify. But we'll talk to you soon, and we'll have our Xavier recap on Sunday. Until then, as always, go Pirates.